Hey guys, tonight we are going deep. The surface of the world is for farming and fighting, but the wealth of the world is hidden beneath our feet. We are joining the medieval miner. We are going to descend into the crushing darkness to steal light from the stone. This is a story about geology, danger, and the silence of the earth. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Now, feel the cool air of the tunnel, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The mountain range rises before us like the spine of some ancient beast, jagged and worn by centuries of wind and rain. These are old mountains, older than kingdoms, older than the memory of stone churches and castle keeps. The peaks are not sharp anymore. They have been rounded by time, softened by weather, their edges dulled like an old knife that has cut through too many years. The slopes are covered in scrub and heather, tough plants that cling to thin soil, their roots finding purchase in cracks and crevices where nothing else will grow. Below the heather line, there are patches of stunted oak and ash, trees that lean away from the prevailing wind, their branches reaching sideways, as if trying to escape the constant push of air that comes howling across the ridges. We are standing at the base of one such slope, looking up at the grey rock face that juts out from the earth like broken teeth. The sky above is the color of pewter, heavy with clouds that promise rain but have not yet delivered. The light is flat, and even the kind of light that makes it hard to judge distance or time. It could be morning or afternoon. The sun is somewhere up there behind the clouds, but we cannot see it. We can only feel the faint warmth on our faces, weak and unconvincing. The entrance to the adit lies ahead of us, a dark mouth in the hillside, roughly rectangular, about the height of a man and perhaps half again as wide. The opening has been cut into the rock by hand, by hammers and chisels and fire, by men who came before us, who followed the same seam of ore that we are about to pursue. The edges of the entrance are rough and uneven, showing the marks of tools, the scars where iron met stone and stone gave way reluctantly, grain by grain. Around the entrance, the ground is littered with debris, broken rock, and spoil heaps, the discarded remnants of what was not wanted, what held no silver or iron, what was simply in the way. As we approach the entrance, the temperature begins to change. The air becomes noticeably cooler, as if we are walking toward a cellar or a well. The warmth of the day, such as it is, does not penetrate into the earth. The mountain keeps its own climate, its own weather, independent of the sky and the sun. We feel the change on our skin first, a gentle cooling, like stepping into shade on a summer day, except there is no summer here, only the eternal twilight of the underground. The smell reaches us next. It is the smell of damp earth, rich and loamy, mixed with something else, something older and more mineral. It is the smell of stone that has never seen sunlight, of water that has seeped through rock for hundreds of years, of air that has been trapped and released and trapped again. There is also the faint, acrid tang of old smoke, the residue of countless fires that have been lit and extinguished in the darkness ahead. Fires used to crack rock, to warm hands, to push back the night that never ends down there. The smoke smell is subtle but persistent, woven into the very fabric of the tunnel, absorbed by the walls and ceiling, a ghost of combustion that lingers long after the flames have died. We pause at the threshold. This is the moment of transition, the point where the world of light gives way to the world of shadow. Behind us, the valley spreads out, green and gray and brown, dotted with the distant shapes of cottages and field boundaries. Ahead, there is only darkness, a darkness so complete that it seems almost solid, as if we could reach out and touch it. The entrance is a frame, a portal, and stepping through it requires a certain resolve, a willingness to trade the known for the unknown, the visible for the invisible. We step inside. The change is immediate and profound. The light from outside follows us for a few paces, illuminating the rough walls and the low ceiling, but it fades quickly, absorbed by the stone, swallowed by the depth of the tunnel. Within 10 steps, we are in twilight. Within 20, we are in near darkness. The tunnel extends ahead of us, sloping gently downward, following the contour of the mountain, following the ore seam that lies hidden in the rock. The floor is uneven, covered with loose stones and puddles of water that have collected in the low spots. Our footsteps echo softly, a dull, repetitive sound that is both comforting and unsettling. It reminds us that we are not alone. That sound still exists here, but it also emphasizes the emptiness, the vast hollowness of the space we have entered. The walls press in on either side. They are perhaps 6 feet apart, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less. They are rough and irregular, showing the natural fracture patterns of the rock, interrupted by the deliberate marks of human excavation. We can see where hammers have struck, where chisels have been driven in, where the rock has been persuaded to split along its weakest planes. The ceiling is low, forcing us to stoop slightly, to keep our heads down, to remain constantly aware of the weight of the mountain pressing down from above. It is not claustrophobic yet, not quite, but the potential is there, lurking in the back of our minds, waiting for the tunnel to narrow further, for the walls to close in just a little bit more. The air is thick and still. There is no wind here, no breeze, no movement of air at all. What we breathe is what the mountain allows us to breathe, a mixture of oxygen and carbon dioxide and water vapor and stone dust, all blended together in proportions that are not quite right, not quite what our lungs are accustomed to. Each breath feels slightly heavier than it should, as if the air itself has weight, as if we are drawing in not just gas, but also the essence of the rock around us. Our breathing becomes more deliberate, more conscious. We notice each inhalation and exhalation in a way we never do in the open air. Before we descend deeper, before we commit ourselves fully to the tunnel and whatever lies at the end of it, there is work to be done on the surface. The medieval miner does not simply walk into a mountain at random, hoping to stumble upon silver or iron. He searches first. He reads the land. He looks for signs. The practice is called dowsing, and it is part skill, part intuition, part something else entirely that no one can quite explain or quantify. The tool is a hazel twig, cut fresh and still green, shaped into a Y with two equal arms and a single handle. The miner holds the two arms of the Y, one in each hand, keeping them parallel to the ground, keeping the single handle pointing forward. Then he walks slowly across the hillside, back and forth in a grid pattern, covering every square yard of ground, watching the hazel twig, waiting for it to react. The twig is supposed to dip or twist when it passes over ore, pulled down by some invisible force that emanates from the metal hidden beneath the soil. Some say it is magnetism. Others say it is the water that often accompanies ore deposits, the moisture that the twig can somehow sense. Still others say it is nothing scientific at all, but rather a gift, a sensitivity that some men possess and others do not, an ability to feel the treasure in the earth the way a blind man can feel the warmth of a fire without seeing the flames. Whether the dowsing works, or whether it is merely superstition mixed with good observation, is a question that has no clear answer. What is certain is that miners have used hazel twigs for generations, and some of them have found ore, and some of them have not, and the debate continues in taverns and workshops and guild halls, with no resolution in sight. But dowsing is only the beginning. The more reliable method is to search for shode, the loose pieces of ore that have been weathered out of the bedrock and carried downslope by rain and frost and gravity. Shode stones are fragments, chips and chunks of ore-bearing rock that have been freed from the mother lode by natural processes and scattered across the hillside like breadcrumbs in a fairy tale, marking a trail that leads back to the source. We are looking for these breadcrumbs now. We walk slowly up the slope, our eyes on the ground, scanning the soil and the scree and the patches of exposed rock. We are looking for anything that seems out of place, anything that has a different color or texture or weight than the ordinary stone of the mountain. Iron ore is often dark and heavy, with a rusty red or brown staining where it has oxidized. Silver ore is more subtle, sometimes appearing as a dull gray or greenish tint in the rock, sometimes associated with lead or copper minerals that are easier to spot. We find our first piece about 50 yards upslope from the adit entrance. It is a small stone, no bigger than a hen's egg, but it is noticeably heavier than the granite and slate around it. The color is darker, a deep gray with flecks of something that might be metal, might be mica, might be nothing at all. We turn it over in our hands, feeling the weight, examining the surface. There are tiny crystals visible in the broken face of the stone, cubic shapes that catch what little light filters through the clouds. This is promising. This is showed. We mark the spot with a cairn, 3 flat stones stacked on top of each other, a simple monument that says we were here, we found something here. Then we continue upward, searching for more. The next piece is 20 yards higher. Then another and another, each one a little closer together, the trail becoming clearer, the breadcrumbs leading us inexorably toward their source. The climb is steep and tiring. Our boots slip on the loose scree. Our hands grab at heather and rock for balance. Our breathing becomes labored, not from the thin air, but from the effort of the ascent. Sweat begins to form on our brow despite the coolness of the day. The wind picks up as we gain elevation, blowing directly into our faces, carrying with it the scent of rain and peat and distance. The showed becomes more abundant. We are finding pieces every few yards now, some of them quite large, the size of a fist or even a small loaf of bread. The concentration of ore is increasing. We are getting close. The lode, the mother vein, the solid seam of ore that runs through the bedrock like a ribbon in a lady's hair, must be nearby, must be just ahead, just a little further up the slope. And then we find it, the outcrop, a section of bedrock that has been exposed by erosion, stripped of its soil cover by wind and rain, laid bare for anyone with eyes to see. The rock face is perhaps 10 feet wide and 6 feet high, jutting out from the hillside at an angle, and running through it, diagonal and insistent, is a seam of darker stone, 6 inches wide at its narrowest point, nearly a foot wide at its thickest. This is the lode. This is what we have been searching for. This is the reason for the adit below, the reason for the tunnel that burrows into the mountain, following this same vein downward and inward, chasing it into the darkness where the pick and hammer and fire must do the work that nature has left unfinished. We examine the outcrop carefully, running our hands over the surface, feeling the texture of the ore, noting where it is richest, where the metal content seems highest. The vein is not uniform. It swells and narrows, branches and rejoins, following the ancient lines of weakness in the host rock, filling in the cracks that formed when the mountain was young, when tectonic forces squeezed and folded the stone like dough. Some sections are almost pure ore, dark and heavy and dense. Other sections are leaner, diluted with quartz and calcite and other gangue minerals that have no value, that will have to be sorted out later, separated from the good stone in a process that is almost as laborious as the mining itself. But this is a good strike. This is worth working. This is worth the danger and the darkness and the back-breaking labor that lies ahead. We can see the vein extending downward into the ground, disappearing beneath the soil and the scree, and we know that it continues, that it runs deep into the mountain, that it connects to the tunnel below, that somewhere in the darkness under our feet, men are already at work, following this same seam, extracting this same ore, one painful piece at a time. The decision is made. We will descend. We will join those men in the darkness. We will add our labor to theirs, our sweat and our breath and our dwindling candle flame to the collective effort of prying wealth from stone. We make our way back down the slope, carefully, step by step, until we reach the adit entrance once more. The darkness within seems even deeper now, more intimidating, now that we know how far it extends, how deep it goes, how thoroughly it penetrates the mountain. But there is no turning back. The ore is there. The work is waiting. We light our candle. It is a tallow candle made from rendered animal fat, smoky and foul-smelling but precious nonetheless. Light is currency in the tunnel. Light is life. Without it, we are helpless, blind, unable to see the rock we must break, or the ladder we must climb, or the shaft we must avoid. The candle is short and thick, designed to burn slowly, to last for hours if we are careful, if we keep it out of drafts, if we do not knock it over or drop it into water. We fix the candle to our hat using a small lump of clay, molding the clay around the base of the candle, pressing it firmly onto the felt brim. The hat itself is simple, a wide-brimmed affair made of boiled wool, stiffened with repeated soakings in water and alum. It is not much protection against falling rock, but it keeps the drips from going down our neck, and it provides a stable platform for the candle, keeping the flame above our head, keeping our hands free for work and balance. The candle flickers as we move. The flame is small and yellow and unstable, dancing in response to currents of air too subtle for us to feel, responding to the movement of our body, to the heat rising from our own exhalation. The light it casts is weak and limited, extending perhaps 10 feet ahead of us, perhaps less, creating a small bubble of visibility in an ocean of darkness. Beyond that bubble there is nothing, nothing we can see, nothing we can trust. Only the sound of water dripping, the echo of our footsteps, the awareness of space that might be open, or might be a wall, or might be a shaft, dropping away into depths we cannot fathom. We begin to descend. The tunnel slopes downward at a gentle angle, perhaps 1 foot of drop for every 10 feet of horizontal distance. It is not steep, not yet, but it is relentless, pulling us deeper with every step, taking us further from the entrance, further from daylight, further from the possibility of easy escape. The walls remain close on either side, rough and damp, weeping moisture in places where water has seeped through the rock from some underground reservoir we cannot see. The moisture gathers in beads and runs down the wall in thin rivulets, collecting in the cracks, dripping onto the floor, creating puddles that reflect our candle flame in fragmentary, shivering images. The floor is treacherous. It is covered with loose rock, with pieces of broken stone that have fallen from the ceiling or been left behind by previous workers. Some of these pieces are large enough to turn an ankle. Some are small and roll underfoot like marbles. We walk carefully, testing each step before committing our weight, keeping one hand on the wall for balance, keeping our head low to avoid the protruding sections of ceiling that seem to reach down to grab our hat and extinguish our candle. The temperature continues to drop. It is noticeably colder here than at the entrance, and it will get colder still as we descend. The mountain is a vast heat sink, maintaining a constant temperature that is the average of the surface conditions throughout the year. In summer, the tunnel is cool and refreshing. In winter, it is relatively warm. But now, in this season that is neither summer nor winter, but something in between, the tunnel is simply cold, a deep, bone-chilling cold that has nothing to do with wind or weather, but is rather the fundamental coldness of stone, the absence of the sun's warmth, the negation of fire. We can see our breath now, small clouds of vapor that form with each exhalation, illuminated briefly by the candle flame before dissipating into the darkness. Our fingers are starting to go numb despite the exertion of walking. We flex them repeatedly, making fists, opening and closing our hands, trying to maintain circulation, trying to keep them responsive because we will need them soon. We will need them to grip and hold and strike. And fingers that are too cold are fingers that cannot be trusted, fingers that might slip at a crucial moment, fingers that might betray us. The tunnel levels out briefly, then continues downward at a steeper angle. We are perhaps 100 yards from the entrance now, perhaps 100 feet below the surface, perhaps more. It is hard to judge distance in the darkness, hard to maintain any sense of space or direction when all you can see is the small circle of light around your feet and the vague shapes of the walls pressing in from either side. And then we reach the stull, the first one, the timber platform that marks the transition from the gently sloping adit to the vertical descent that follows. The stull is a wooden construction, heavy beams of oak or ash, notched and fitted together, wedged into the walls of the shaft, creating a platform that is just large enough for a man to stand on, to rest on, to work from. Below the stull, there is a ladder. Above it, nothing but darkness and the sense of vast empty space. A shaft that rises upward toward another level, another tunnel, another network of passages that we cannot see from here, but know must exist because the work continues above us, because the mountain is honeycombed with these tunnels, with these shafts, with these desperate excavations chasing veins of ore wherever they might lead. The ladder is crude. It is a single long timber, perhaps 8 inches in diameter, with smaller branches cut to length and lashed across it at regular intervals to form rungs. The rungs are not uniform. Some are thick and sturdy. Others are thinner, less reliable. All of them are slippery, coated with moisture and algae and the residue of countless hands and boots, polished by use until they are as smooth as river stones. The ladder descends into darkness, disappearing beyond the reach of our candle light, extending downward to depths we can only guess at. We test the first rung with our weight, slowly, carefully, ready to pull back if it gives way. It holds. We commit our full weight to it. It still holds. We lower ourselves onto the ladder, one rung at a time, facing inward, our chest pressed against the timber, our hands gripping the sides, our feet searching for each successive rung, never quite sure if it will be there, never quite certain it will support us. The descent is slow and methodical. There is no rushing. There is no shortcuts. There is only the ladder and the darkness, and the candle flame guttering and recovering with each movement, threatening to go out, stubbornly refusing to do so. The ladder is perhaps 30 feet long. It feels like miles. Each rung is a small victory. Each foot of descent is a commitment, a decision to go deeper rather than to climb back up, to continue into the mountain rather than to retreat to the surface. Our arms begin to ache from gripping the ladder. Our legs begin to shake from the sustained tension of controlling our descent. Sweat runs down our face despite the cold, stinging our eyes, making it even harder to see in the dim light of the candle. And then our foot finds nothing. We have reached the bottom. We step off the ladder onto another stull, another platform, and we take a moment to rest, to catch our breath, to let the trembling in our legs subside. We are deeper now, much deeper. The air is thicker, heavier, harder to breathe. The darkness is more complete. The silence is more profound. We can no longer hear any sounds from the surface. We can no longer imagine the sky or the clouds or the heather on the hillside. All that exists now is the tunnel and the rock, and the candle flame, and the knowledge that we must descend further still. There is another ladder below this stull, and below that another, and another. The mine is structured in levels, each one connected by these vertical shafts, each one penetrating deeper into the mountain, each one following the vein of ore as it dips and angles through the bedrock. The miners who work here move up and down these ladders multiple times each day, climbing to the surface at the end of their shift, descending again at the beginning of the next, their bodies hardened by the constant effort, their muscles adapted to the specific demands of this vertical world. We continue downward, ladder after ladder, stull after stull. The count becomes uncertain. Was that the third ladder or the fourth, the fifth or the sixth? The darkness plays tricks on our memory, compresses time, makes it impossible to maintain any clear sense of sequence or progression. We simply descend, hand over hand, foot below foot, trusting the ladder, trusting the timber, trusting that somewhere below us there is a bottom, a working level, a place where the descent ends and the real work begins. And finally we reach it, the bottom, the working level. A horizontal tunnel extends in both directions, following the vein, lit by a few scattered candles stuck to the walls with clay, their flames small and struggling, barely sufficient to push back the darkness, but somehow maintaining their existence, somehow refusing to be extinguished. The tunnel is lower here, narrower, more oppressive. This is not the added entrance, carefully carved to allow easy passage. This is a working face, hacked out of the rock by brute force, just large enough to allow a man to move through it if he stoops, if he turns sideways in places, if he does not mind the constant scrape of stone against his shoulders and back. Other miners are here, shadows in the candlelight, shapes that might be human or might be formations of rock, until they move and reveal themselves. They do not speak. They barely acknowledge our arrival. Speech is labor down here, an expenditure of breath that must be carefully rationed, saved for only the most essential communications. Instead, there are nods, grunts, gestures, a hand pointing toward a section of tunnel, a lift of the chin indicating direction, a shake of the head meaning no, not there, somewhere else. We move past them, deeper into the working section, until we reach the face, the end of the tunnel, the place where the rock still stands unbroken, where the vein of ore continues into the mountain, where the next foot of progress must be won with hammer and chisel and fire and pain. The face is perhaps 7 feet wide and 6 feet high, irregular and rough, showing the natural texture of the granite that hosts the ore vein. The vein itself is visible as a dark band running diagonally across the face, richer in color, denser in appearance, the target of all this effort, the reason for this entire subterranean enterprise. But the granite is hard, impossibly hard, harder than any metal the medieval world can forge. The iron tools we carry, the hammers and chisels and picks, are almost useless against this stone. We can strike at it for hours, raising the hammer and bringing it down with all our strength, driving the chisel into the rock, and achieve almost nothing. A few chips, a small crack, a slight deepening of an existing fracture. But nothing like the progress we need, nothing like the rate of advance required to make this mine profitable, to extract enough ore to justify the cost and the danger and the exhausting labor. The granite marks our tools. It turns the edge of the chisel. It absorbs the blow of the hammer and gives back nothing. It stands firm and unmoving, a wall of stone that has been compressed and crystallized over millions of years, fused into a solid mass that has no weakness, no soft spots, no lines of cleavage that might allow it to be split or shattered. So we cannot chop the granite, we cannot carve it, we cannot break it with force alone. We must use a different method, an older method, a technique that predates iron tools, that goes back to the very beginning of mining, to the ancient world when men first realized that certain stones could be made to yield their secrets through the application of heat and cold, through thermal shock, through the exploitation of the fact that all materials expand when heated and contract when cooled. And if the expansion and contraction are rapid enough, violent enough, the internal stresses will become too great, and the material will fracture, will crack, will shatter into manageable pieces. This technique is called fire setting, and it is our only option here, our only hope of progress against this implacable wall of granite. We begin by gathering wood. There is a stockpile deeper in the tunnel, bundles of dry branches and split logs carried down from the surface by previous shifts, accumulated here for exactly this purpose. The wood must be dry. Wet wood will not burn hot enough. It will smoke and smolder, but not produce the intense heat required to stress the rock to its breaking point. The wood we select has been seasoned, stored in a shed somewhere on the surface for months or even years, allowing the sap to dry out, the moisture to evaporate, transforming living wood into fuel, into potential energy waiting to be released. We carry armfuls of this wood to the face and begin to stack it against the rock. The arrangement is important. We do not simply pile the wood randomly. We build a structure, a careful construction designed to maximize heat transfer to the rock while minimizing smoke in the tunnel. The base layer is small twigs and chips of wood, kindling that will catch easily from the candle flame. Above that, progressively larger pieces, building up in size until the top layers are substantial logs, chunks of oak or ash as thick as a man's thigh, dense with potential heat, capable of burning for hours once they catch. The stack grows until it reaches from floor to ceiling, pressed tight against the rock face, covering as much surface area as possible. We want the heat to be concentrated, focused on a specific section of the granite, heating it uniformly, driving the temperature up as high as the wood will allow. We step back and examine our work. The stack is good. It is well built. It will burn. We light it with our candle, touching the flame to the kindling at the base, watching as the small twigs begin to glow and smoke and finally catch. The fire spreads slowly at first, tentatively, the flames small and hesitant, but then with increasing confidence as more wood catches, as the heat builds upon itself, as the fire finds its momentum and begins to roar. The flames are bright, almost painfully bright after the long darkness of the descent. They cast wild, dancing shadows on the tunnel walls, making the space seem larger and more chaotic than it really is. The light reaches back down the tunnel, illuminating the other miners who have stopped their work to watch, their faces orange and flickering, their eyes reflecting the fire, their expressions unreadable. The heat is immediate and intense. We back away from the face, retreating down the tunnel, putting distance between ourselves and the fire. The air begins to shimmer. The temperature rises dramatically. We can feel it on our skin, on our faces, a searing radiance that makes us squint and turn away. The candles on the walls begin to sag from the heat, their wax softening, their flames growing larger and less controlled. And then the smoke begins. Thick grey smoke that pours from the burning wood, filling the tunnel, rising to the ceiling, spreading backward toward the adit entrance, seeking any path of escape, any route to the surface. The smoke is acrid and choking. It stings our eyes and fills our lungs. We cough and gasp, pulling our shirts up over our mouths and noses, trying to filter the air, trying to breathe through the cloth, but it is not enough. The smoke is too thick, too pervasive. It is everywhere. We retreat further, climbing back up the ladder to the level above, seeking cleaner air, seeking a place where we can breathe without coughing, where we can wait for the fire to do its work. Behind us, the fire continues to burn, unseen now in the smoke, but we can hear it, a deep, steady roar punctuated by the occasional crack as a piece of wood splits or a knot explodes from the heat. The sound is both comforting and ominous. It means the fire is strong. It is doing what it is supposed to do, but it also means the mountain is being wounded, the rock is being assaulted, and we do not know how it will respond. We wait, minutes pass, then an hour, then longer. The fire must be allowed to burn completely, to transfer all its heat into the rock, to raise the temperature of the granite as high as it will go. We cannot rush this. Impatience will ruin the effect. The rock must be thoroughly heated, uniformly heated, brought to a state where every crystal in its structure is expanded, where every grain is pressing against its neighbors, where the internal stresses are at their maximum. Finally, when we judge the time is right, when the sound of the fire has diminished to a low crackling and the worst of the smoke has cleared, we descend again, carefully, covering our faces, breathing through cloth. The tunnel is filled with residual heat. The air itself is hot, almost too hot to breathe. Our eyes water from the lingering smoke. Our vision is blurred and uncertain. We approach the face. The wood has been consumed, reduced to embers and ash and a few larger pieces that are still glowing red in the darkness. The rock behind it is radiating heat, visible as a shimmer in the air, palpable as a force that pushes us back even before we get close. The granite is hot, very hot, hot enough that we cannot touch it, cannot approach within arm's reach without feeling our skin begin to burn. Now comes the critical moment. We have buckets of water, cold water drawn from a stream on the surface, carried down the shaft bucket by bucket, waiting for this exact purpose. We lift the first bucket and throw the contents at the heated rock. The effect is instantaneous and dramatic. The water strikes the hot granite and flashes to steam with a violent hiss that fills the tunnel with sound and vapor. The temperature differential is extreme, hundreds of degrees difference between the rock and the water, and the granite cannot handle it. The outer surface cools rapidly while the interior remains hot, setting up stresses that the crystalline structure cannot accommodate. We hear it before we see it, a sharp crack like a musket shot, then another, then a series of them, rapid fire, as fractures propagate through the heated zone. The rock is breaking. The thermal shock is shattering it from within. We throw more water, more hissing, more steam, more cracking. The sound is tremendous in the confined space of the tunnel, echoing and re-echoing, amplified by the walls, until it seems the entire mountain is fracturing, splitting apart, coming undone. But it is just this one section, just this heated zone at the face, responding exactly as we need it to respond, failing in exactly the way we want it to fail. The steam clears slowly, rising to the ceiling, condensing on the cold rock, dripping back down in a warm rain that soaks us through. We wait for our eyes to adjust, for the light of our candles to penetrate the mist, for the shape of the rock face to become visible again. And when it does, we see the cracks, deep cracks, serious fractures running through the granite, dividing it into blocks and slabs that are no longer part of the solid mountain, but are instead individual pieces, separate and vulnerable, ready to be pried free. We move forward with iron bars, wedges, and hammers. Now the tools are effective. Now they have purchase. We drive the wedges into the cracks, expanding them, forcing them wider. We lever with the bars, applying pressure to the loosened blocks, working them back and forth, breaking the last few connections that hold them to the parent rock. The blocks come free with grinding reluctance, each one a small victory, each one a few more pounds of ore-bearing rock that can be carried to the surface, crushed, sorted, smelted. This is the rhythm of medieval mining. Fire and water, heat and cold, expansion and contraction, breaking the unbreakable through patience and understanding of how materials behave when pushed to their limits. It is slow work, dangerous work, but it is effective. And in a world without explosives, without modern drilling equipment, without powered machinery of any kind, it is the only way to defeat granite, the only way to win wealth from stone. The work continues, but the mountain has other weapons beyond hardness. The rock is broken now, fractured into manageable pieces, but that is only the beginning of our struggle. The mountain fights back with water, always water. Endless, relentless, patient water that seeps and drips and flows from every crack and crevice, from every pore in the stone, from reservoirs hidden deep in the earth that we cannot see and cannot reach and cannot stop. The water is everywhere down here. It runs down the walls in thin films, creating slick surfaces that glisten in the candlelight. It drips from the ceiling in a constant, irregular percussion, drop after drop after drop, each one adding to the puddles on the floor, each one contributing to the slow, inexorable accumulation that threatens to drown the mine if we do nothing, if we stop working even for a day, even for a few hours. The lowest levels are the worst. Water obeys gravity just as we do, flowing downward, seeking the deepest point it can find. And in a mine, that point is always the working face, always the place where we need to be, where we need to have our feet dry and our footing secure. But the water does not care about our needs. It pools at the bottom of every shaft, filling the sumps we have dug to contain it, overflowing when we cannot keep up with the inflow, creeping across the tunnel floor, turning solid ground into a cold, shallow lake that soaks through our boots and numbs our feet and makes every step an exercise in misery. We fight the water with pumps, crude mechanical devices that transform human effort into upward water movement, defying gravity through leverage and persistence, and the constant grinding labor of men and boys who have no choice but to keep working, keep turning the cranks, keep pulling the chains, or watch the mine fill up and all our work be for nothing. The pump at this level is a rag and chain design, ancient in principle, simple in construction, brutal in its demands on those who operate it. The mechanism consists of a wooden tube, perhaps 8 inches in diameter, running vertically from the sump at the bottom of the shaft up to the level above, a distance of perhaps 30 feet. Inside this tube is a continuous loop of chain, heavy iron links that rattle and scrape against the wood as they move. Attached to the chain at regular intervals are the rags, balls of leather and cloth, tightly wound and sized to fit snugly inside the tube, creating a seal that is not perfect but is good enough, tight enough to trap water above each ball and carry it upward as the chain moves. At the top of the tube, there is a wheel, a large wooden wheel mounted horizontally on an axle, and around this wheel the chain passes, completing the loop. The wheel is turned by a crank, a long wooden handle that extends out from the axle, and the crank is turned by a boy, a young miner, perhaps 12 or 14 years old, whose arms and back and legs are already adapted to this specific torture, this endless circular motion that defines his days, and will continue to define them until he is strong enough to work at the face, or unlucky enough to be injured and unable to work at all. The boy is there now, in the dim light, his face pale and thin, his arms moving in a rhythm that is so ingrained it requires no thought, no conscious effort. He pushes the crank handle forward, then sideways, then back, then around again, completing the circle, and the chain moves, and the rag balls move with it, rising inside the tube, carrying their burden of water upward, releasing it at the top into a trough that channels it away to another shaft, another pump, another stage in the long journey that will eventually bring the water back to the surface where it can flow away down the hillside and rejoin the streams and rivers from which it ultimately came. The work is hypnotic in its monotony. Push, turn, push, turn, push, turn. The crank handle is worn smooth by countless hands, polished by the friction of skin and sweat and time. The wheel turns with a rhythmic squeak, a sound that penetrates everything, that becomes part of the background noise of the mine, that the boy probably no longer hears consciously, but that would wake him instantly if it stopped, if something broke, if the chain jammed, or the wheel seized, or the tube cracked, and the water started pouring out. We watch him for a moment as we work on the broken rock, prying out pieces, loading them into baskets. The boy does not look at us. He stares at nothing, his eyes unfocused, his mind somewhere else, somewhere far from this tunnel and this darkness and this endless repetitive motion. Perhaps he is thinking about the surface, about daylight, about the meal he will eat when his shift ends. Perhaps he is thinking about nothing at all, his consciousness dimmed to a low flicker, just enough awareness to keep his body moving, to maintain the rhythm, to ensure the pump keeps working. The water that rises through the tube is not clean. It is brown and silty, carrying dissolved minerals and rock dust and the residue of 1,000 fires. It smells of iron and sulfur and decay. When it empties into the trough at the top, it makes a splashing sound, a wet slapping that mixes with the squeak of the wheel and the rattle of the chain to create a symphony of mechanical labor, a soundtrack of survival against the mountain's patient siege. But even with the pump running constantly, the water level rises. The inflow is greater than our ability to remove it. The sump is deeper today than it was yesterday, and it will be deeper tomorrow than it is today. Eventually, this level will have to be abandoned, sealed off, left to flood completely while we retreat to higher ground and start again, following the vein upward working sections that are still dry enough to stand in, still accessible enough to justify the effort. This is the cycle of deep mining. Descend, extract, retreat. Go down as far as you can until the water wins, then go up and start over. The deeper veins, the richer seams, remain untouched, protected by water, guarded by the fundamental incompatibility between human breathing and total submersion. We can only take what the mountain allows us to take, only work where the water allows us to work. The rest remains, a treasure locked away, waiting for some future generation with better pumps, better technology, better solutions to problems that have plagued miners since mining began. The boy continues to turn the crank. He will turn it for another 6 hours. Then another boy will take his place, and the wheel will keep turning, the chain will keep moving, the water will keep rising, and we will keep working for as long as we can, extracting as much ore as possible before the inevitable retreat. But water is not the only enemy. There is also the air, or rather the lack of it, the absence of good air, the presence of bad air. The miners have many names for it. Some call it damp, though it has nothing to do with moisture. Some call it choke damp or black damp, or simply the bad air. And everyone knows what they mean. Everyone has felt it. Everyone has experienced the slow, suffocating sensation of breathing air that has been breathed too many times already. Air that has been depleted of whatever vital quality makes it capable of sustaining life. The science of it is not understood. The mechanisms are mysterious, but the effects are unmistakable. When air goes bad, candles dim and flicker and sometimes go out entirely, even though there is no draft to extinguish them. When air goes bad, breathing becomes labored, each inhalation requiring more effort, each exhalation bringing less relief. When air goes bad, men become weak and dizzy, their thoughts become confused, their movements become clumsy, and if they do not retreat to fresher air quickly, they will collapse. And if they collapse and no one pulls them out, they will die silently and without struggle, their candles extinguished, their bodies still, adding to the count of men the mountain has claimed. The problem is worst at the working faces, at the deepest points, the furthest points from the adit entrance where fresh air from the surface can penetrate. Air does not move on its own in these deep tunnels. It sits and stagnates and slowly becomes poisoned by the breathing of men and the smoke of fires and the exhalations of the rock itself, which seems to release some noxious vapor, some invisible corruption that mixes with the good air and ruins it. So we must move the air. We must force it to circulate. We must bring fresh air down from the surface and drive the bad air out, creating a current, a flow, an artificial wind that will keep the working faces supplied with breathable atmosphere. The solution is bellows. Massive bellows constructed at the surface, near the adit entrance, connected to a system of wooden pipes that extend down into the mine, following the main tunnel, branching off to the various working levels, terminating in open ends near the faces where the air is needed most. The bellows are enormous, far larger than anything a blacksmith would use. They are made of heavy leather stretched over a wooden frame, with valves that open and close, drawing in air on one stroke and expelling it on the next. The frame is perhaps 10 feet long and 4 feet wide, and it requires significant force to operate, to compress the leather and push the air through the valves and into the pipes. The force comes from boys, always boys. The mine consumes boys, uses them for every task that requires endurance rather than strength, repetition rather than skill. 2 boys are assigned to each bellows, working in coordination, one pulling up on the handle as the other pushes down, alternating, creating a rhythm that is slightly faster than a heartbeat, slightly slower than a march, a tempo that can be maintained for hours without complete exhaustion, though exhaustion will come eventually, inevitably, no matter how well paced the work. We can hear them now, even down here in the depths. The sound travels through the pipes, amplified and distorted, a rhythmic whooshing that rises and falls, inhale and exhale, the breathing of the mine itself, mechanical and unnatural but absolutely necessary. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The sound is constant as the squeak of the pump wheel. Another element in the acoustic landscape of the underground, another reminder that nothing here is natural, nothing here is sustainable without continuous human effort. The air comes out of the pipe end warm and slightly stale, but still better than what we have been breathing, still containing enough of the vital quality to make candles burn brighter, to make breathing easier, to push back the threat of collapse and unconsciousness for another few hours. We position ourselves near the pipe end when we can, when our work allows it, breathing deeply, filling our lungs with this gift from the surface, this manufactured breeze that smells faintly of sunshine and grass and the world above, scents so faint and so diluted by their journey through the pipes that they are almost imaginary, almost wishful thinking. But we detect them anyway, or believe we detect them, and the belief is enough. The imagination is enough to make the air taste sweeter, to make the work seem slightly less oppressive. But the bellows cannot run continuously. The buoys must rest. The leather must cool. The valves must be checked and repaired. There are periods, sometimes lasting an hour or more, when the whooshing stops, when the air from the pipe end slows to a trickle and then ceases entirely, and the tunnels begin to fill with bad air once again. And we must work faster, must extract what we can before the atmosphere becomes too poor to continue, before the candles start to dim and the breathing becomes too difficult, and we have no choice but to retreat. The boys at the surface, the ones turning the bellows crank, are working in teams. They rotate shifts, taking breaks, but there is always someone working, always someone keeping the air moving during operational hours. Their arms ache. Their backs hurt. Their hands develop calluses, and then blisters, and then new calluses over the blisters. Some of them will do this work for years before moving on to other tasks. Some of them will never move on, will never grow strong enough for harder labor, will spend their entire working lives as bellows boys or pump boys, their bodies shaped by the specific demands of these repetitive motions, their spines curved, their shoulders hunched, their muscles developed in strange asymmetrical patterns that mark them as mine workers, even when they are far from the mine, even when they are trying to forget what they do in the darkness beneath the earth. The air flows, the water rises, and we work. We load the broken rock into containers, rough woven baskets made from willow or hazel, flexible enough to squeeze through narrow passages, strong enough to carry 30 or 40 pounds of ore without breaking. When a basket is full, it must be moved. It must be dragged or carried through the tunnels to the shaft, hoisted to the surface, emptied and returned. This is the haul, the transport, the endless logistics of moving heavy material through confined spaces in near-total darkness. In some mines, on some levels, they use sleds. Flat wooden platforms with curved runners, called corfs, loaded with broken rock and dragged along the tunnel floor by men who bend forward and lean into leather straps that cross their chests, who become human draft animals, who pull and strain and gasp, their boots slipping on wet stone, their bodies bent almost double in the low tunnels, their progress measured in feet per hour rather than miles. We see them passing now, coming from a side tunnel, merging with the main passage. Two men, both young but already old in their movements, already worn down by this work, pulling a corf loaded with perhaps 150 pounds of rock. The sled scrapes and grinds against the tunnel floor, catching on protruding stones, requiring constant adjustment, constant pulling at different angles to keep it moving, to prevent it from wedging against the walls or tipping over and spilling its load. The men do not speak. They breathe in harsh gasps, their exhalations visible as clouds in the candlelight. Their faces are black with rock dust and soot. Their eyes are red and watering. Their lips are cracked and bleeding. They wear simple clothes, wool shirts and leather breeches, both so impregnated with dirt and sweat and mineral residue that the original color is impossible to determine. Everything is the same shade of gray-black, the universal color of the mine, the color that claims all cloth and all skin and all light that penetrates this far underground. They pull their corf past us without acknowledgement. We are just another obstacle, another thing to navigate around, another complication in their journey to the shaft. Their progress is agonizingly slow. The tunnel is perhaps 300 feet long from here to the shaft. It will take them half an hour to cover that distance, maybe more. And when they reach the shaft, They will have to wait for the hoist, for the rope and bucket system that will carry their load to the surface. And while they wait, they will rest, bent over, hands on knees, breathing hard, recovering just enough strength to make the return journey, to drag the empty corf back to the working face, to load it again, to repeat the process again and again, as many times as they can manage in a 12-hour shift. At other locations, where the tunnels are higher and wider, they use wheeled carts, but here the passages are too narrow, too low, too irregular for wheels. Here it is sleds or baskets, and baskets are lighter to carry back when empty but cannot hold as much, cannot move as much or per trip. The efficiency is terrible. The human cost is enormous, but efficiency is not measured in human comfort or human health. Efficiency is measured in ore extracted per day, in silver recovered per week, in profit accumulated per year. And by those measures, by those cold mathematical calculations, this system works. It produces results. It generates wealth, even if that wealth is purchased with the bodies and the breath and the broken backs of men who will die young, who will cough black sludge for the rest of their shortened lives, whose lungs are already damaged beyond repair by the dust they breathe with every inhalation. The Corf men disappear around a bend in the tunnel. The sound of scraping metal on stone fades slowly, replaced by the ambient noise of dripping water and squeaking pumps and distant bellows. We return to our work, filling another basket, readying another load for the long journey to the surface. When our basket is full, we lift it between two of us, each taking one side of the rim, distributing the weight. It is heavy, perhaps 60 pounds, an awkward dead weight that wants to pull our arms from our sockets, that makes our fingers ache even through the thick leather gloves we wear. We begin to walk, slowly, carefully, our backs bent to fit the ceiling height, our feet finding purchase on the slippery floor through long practice and constant vigilance. The journey is long. The tunnel twists and turns, following the vein, not following any logical path that would make transportation easier. We squeeze through narrow sections where the basket scrapes both walls simultaneously. We climb over rock falls that have not yet been cleared, stepping carefully on loose stones that shift and roll underfoot. We wade through puddles where the water is ankle deep, feeling the cold seep into our boots, knowing that our feet will be numb before we reach the shaft, knowing that we will spend the entire return journey with frozen toes that refuse to bend properly, that might develop frostbite or trench foot or any of the other ailments that plague men who work in constant dampness. Other workers pass us going the opposite direction, empty-handed, returning to the face for another load. We exchange nods. No words, just acknowledgement. We are all in this together. We are all serving the same master, the same insatiable demand for ore, for metal, for the wealth that lies hidden in the rock and must be freed regardless of the cost. Finally, we reach the shaft, the vertical passage that connects this level to the surface, the route by which everything must travel, ore going up, supplies coming down, men ascending and descending at the beginning and end of each shift. The shaft is perhaps 10 feet in diameter, perfectly circular, extending upward into darkness that our candles cannot penetrate. Somewhere far above, perhaps 200 feet, perhaps more, is daylight, but we cannot see it from here, cannot even imagine it, so complete is the darkness, so total is the separation between this world and that one. The hoist mechanism is simple but effective. A rope, thick hemp rope, hangs down the center of the shaft, disappearing into the darkness above. Attached to the bottom of the rope is a bucket, an iron bucket with a capacity of perhaps 2 cubic feet, reinforced with metal bands, designed to take the abuse of constant loading and unloading, of being banged against rock walls, of being dropped and dragged and generally mistreated. We dump our basket of rock into the bucket, hearing the pieces clatter and scrape as they settle. The bucket is perhaps 1/3 full now. It will take several more baskets to fill it, to create a load worth hoisting. We wait for the other workers to arrive with their loads. standing in the relative spaciousness of the shaft chamber, grateful for the few extra feet of headroom, grateful for the brief rest. The pump is louder here. The rag and chain mechanism is housed in an alcove adjacent to the shaft, and the squeaking of the wheel and the rattle of the chain and the splashing of water are all amplified by the circular walls, creating a cacophony that makes conversation impossible even if anyone had the energy or inclination to talk. The pump boy is there, still turning his crank, still maintaining his rhythm, his face a mask of exhausted determination. He does not look at us. We do not look at him. There is nothing to say, nothing to offer, no comfort that words could provide. More baskets arrive. The bucket fills. When it is loaded to capacity, one of the men gives 3 sharp tugs on a signal rope, a separate lighter rope that runs parallel to the main hoist rope. The signal travels up the shaft to the surface where men are waiting, where a windlass or a horse-powered winch is ready to lift the load. There is a pause, a moment of waiting, and then the bucket begins to rise, slowly, jerkily, the rope creaking and stretching under the weight, the bucket swaying and spinning as it ascends. We watch it go, rising into the darkness, becoming a shadow, then a memory, then nothing. The sound of its passage continues, the scrape of metal against rock as it bounces off the shaft walls, the creak of rope, the distant sound of men shouting commands at the surface. And then silence. And then, minutes later, the empty bucket descending, coming back to us, ready for another load. This is how the ore travels, bucket by bucket, load by load, hour by hour, day by day. The accumulation is slow but steady. Over time, over weeks and months, tons of rock will make this journey, will rise from the darkness into the light, will be dumped onto growing piles at the surface where the next phase of the work begins. Because broken rock is not ore. Not yet. Not in any useful sense. The ore is mixed with worthless gang, with quartz and calcite and granite, with all the material that surrounded the vein, that was broken when the ore was broken, that came along for the ride because there was no way to separate it underground, no light good enough to see by, no space large enough to work in. No time or energy to waste on sorting when every moment must be dedicated to extraction, to bringing material to the surface where it can be properly examined and processed. At the surface, near the mine entrance, there is a stamp mill, a water-powered crushing machine that represents the cutting edge of medieval ore processing technology. The mill is built over a stream, a fast-flowing mountain stream that never runs dry, that provides the power needed to operate the heavy hammers that will pulverize the ore-bearing rock into powder fine enough to release its metallic contents. The structure is simple but impressive. A large wooden water wheel, perhaps 15 feet in diameter, mounted horizontally on an axle, turned by the flow of water channeled through a sluice. The axle extends into the mill building, and attached to it are cams, wooden projections that rise and fall as the wheel turns, and the cams lift and drop the stamps, massive wooden pestles shod with iron, each weighing perhaps 50 pounds, each capable of delivering a crushing blow when dropped from height. The stamps are arranged in a row, usually 4 or 5 of them, each one lifted and dropped in sequence by the rotating cams, creating a continuous rhythm of impacts, a mechanical drumbeat that can be heard for miles across the valley, that announces to anyone within earshot that the mine is operating, that ore is being processed, that wealth is being created. Thump, 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 thump. The sound is deep and resonant, felt as much as heard, each impact sending vibrations through the ground, through the building, through the bodies of the men who work there. The rhythm never changes. The water wheel turns at a constant speed, governed by the flow of the stream, and the stamps rise and fall with mechanical precision, indifferent to everything except the laws of physics and the structural integrity of the machinery. The ore is fed into the stamp mill through a hopper broken rock dumped in by the basketful, falling into mortar boxes beneath the stamps, heavy iron-lined troughs that contain the material being crushed. Water is added constantly. creating a slurry, a thick paste of rock flour and liquid that flows through screens, separating the finest particles from the larger ones, carrying the powder away to settling ponds where it will be further processed, where the metal-bearing particles will be separated from the worthless rock dust through a series of washing and panning operations that are tedious and time-consuming but necessary, absolutely necessary, because the ore content is low, perhaps only a few percent, and every bit of waste must be removed to make the final product viable. The stamps rise and fall. The rock is crushed. The powder flows. The process is continuous during daylight hours, running as long as there is enough ore stockpiled to keep the hoppers fed, as long as there are men available to tend the machinery, to clear jams, to adjust the water flow, to scrape out the mortar boxes when they become clogged with partially crushed material. The noise is tremendous. The building shakes with each impact. The workers who tend the stamp mill are partially deaf, their hearing damaged by years of exposure to this relentless percussion, their conversations conducted in shouts, their world reduced to a narrow range of frequencies that can compete with the thumping of the stamps and the roaring of the water wheel and the general cacophony of industrial processing conducted without any concern for the comfort or safety of those who operate the machinery. But we are not there, not yet. We are still underground, still working at the face, still breaking rock and loading baskets and fighting the water and the bad air and the darkness. The stamp mill is distant, separate, part of the surface world that we can barely remember, that seems almost mythical in its sunlit openness, in its abundant fresh air, in its space to stand upright and move freely. The shift continues. We work. We break more rock with fire and water. We fill more baskets. We make more trips to the shaft. The routine is numbing, almost meditative in its repetition. Our bodies moving through practiced motions while our minds drift, thinking about nothing, thinking about everything, trying not to think about how many hours remain before we can climb the ladders and emerge into daylight and breathe air that has not been breathed 1,000 times before. Time is strange down here. It does not flow normally. It pools and eddies, and sometimes seems to stop entirely. We cannot see the sun, cannot track its movement across the sky, cannot judge the passing of hours by any normal means. We estimate based on candle consumption, burning through one tallow stick and lighting the next, keeping rough count in our heads. But the count is unreliable, easily lost, easily confused with yesterday's count or last week's count or some other shift that blends seamlessly with this one in memory. Eventually, from somewhere far up the shaft, we hear the signal. 3 long blasts on a horn, the sound echoing down the tunnels, bouncing off walls, reaching into every corner of the mine. End of shift. Time to ascend. Time to leave the darkness. The announcement ripples through the mine. Workers begin to move toward the shafts, carrying their tools, their remaining candles, anything valuable that cannot be left behind. We join the migration, walking through tunnels that seem slightly less oppressive now that we know we are leaving them, climbing the ladders with renewed energy despite our exhaustion, pulling ourselves up rung by rung, level by level, rising through the mountain toward the distant promise of open air. The climb is long, our arms burn, our legs shake, but we continue, driven by the knowledge that each ladder brings us closer, that each stall platform marks progress, that somewhere above us is the added entrance, is daylight, is freedom from the pressing weight of stone. And then we see it. A faint glow ahead, not candlelight but actual daylight, pale and weak but unmistakable, filtering into the tunnel from the entrance, creating a gradient from absolute darkness to twilight to the gray light of late afternoon. We increase our pace, walking faster, no longer stooping, the ceiling higher here, the tunnel wider, everything opening up as we approach the threshold. We emerge. We step out of the mountain into the world. The transition is overwhelming. The air hits us first, fresh, cold air, moving air, air that has not been trapped and recycled and depleted. We breathe deeply, filling our lungs, coughing out the rock dust and the smoke residue and the staleness, replacing it with oxygen and moisture and the scent of earth and vegetation and living things. The air tastes sweet, impossibly sweet, like honey or wine or some delicacy we had forgotten existed. The light is next. Even though the sun is low, even though evening is approaching, the ambient light seems painfully bright after the darkness of the tunnels. We squint and shield our eyes, waiting for our vision to adjust, waiting for the shapes around us to resolve into recognizable forms. The sky is gray and clouded, but it is still the sky, vast and open and infinite. And just seeing it, just having that openness above us instead of stone, makes us feel lighter, makes our breathing come easier, makes the weight of the day's labor seem slightly more bearable. We join the other miners gathering near the entrance, all of us blackened by soot and dust, all of us wet and tired and ready for rest. There is a trough of water, cold stream water, and we splash it on our faces and hands, washing away the worst of the grime, revealing skin beneath, though the stains run deep into every pore and wrinkle, marking us as mine workers as clearly as any brand. The day's ore is piled nearby, the accumulated output of dozens of men working dozens of hours, a heap of broken rock perhaps 6 feet high, waiting to be sorted and crushed and processed. Somewhere in that pile is silver, hidden in the matrix of stone, waiting to be freed. The exact amount is unknown, will remain unknown until the processing is complete. But there is enough. There is always enough, or the mine would have been abandoned long ago. The silver is safe, locked in the rock, guarded by the mine owner's men. It will be crushed tomorrow or the day after, whenever the stamp mill has cleared its current backlog. And from that crushing will come powder, and from that powder will come concentrate, and from that concentrate will come ingots, pure shining metal, wealth in its most concentrated form, the reward for all this labor, all this danger, all this sacrifice. But that is tomorrow's concern. Tonight we are done. Tonight we walk down the hillside to the village, to the cottages where we sleep, to the meals that wait for us, simple food but hot and filling. Tonight we rest. We sit by fires and let the warmth seep into our bones. We eat and drink and do not speak much because speech requires energy we do not have. We sleep deeply, dreamlessly, our bodies recovering, preparing for tomorrow when we will descend again, when we will return to the darkness, when the cycle will repeat because the vein continues, because the ore remains, because the mountain still holds secrets that we must steal piece by piece, load by load, shift after shift. And as the mountain stands silent against the stars, hiding its remaining secrets in the dark, the miners rest. The work is done. Sleep well.